my calling. God did not give me the skill to basically come here and preach 46 times a year or whatever the case may be. But the hope is that we'll find some common ground in the stories that I will share that I feel like are part of God's story. And that's finding our story inside of God's story. And it's really about the power of invitation. And so we're gonna talk through a whole bunch of different things, and I'm gonna try to make sure that we get through all 9 pages in 30 minutes or less. We timed it the other day, it was fine. You know, there's not much to do on the way to Farmington. My wife is a good woman. That's what we got. So how did I end up here? I don't know, honestly, other than when we got here from when we came from Houston to Durango, we called pretty quickly after a hurricane happened in Houston and started calling around to a bunch of churches and talked to 4 different churches. And in the course of about maybe 24 hours, talked to all those folks about, hey, would you respond to what's happening in Houston? We know a ton of people who are affected by this hurricane and have now been flooded. So we're going to go back. So this is like Monday, and we're going to leave on Thursday. There's not much time to gather stuff together. So 3 of those churches were like, yeah, you know, we'll just give to our local groups, and they'll get it distributed down there in Houston. But DJ jumped in feet first and was like, yes, we're 100% in on this. Tell us how we can do that. And by the time we got to service on Wednesday, we had a whole trailer full of stuff from the vineyard and money that somebody had donated and all kinds of things. And here we are, after never wanting to drive to Houston again, turned around and drove back to Houston, but with very good purpose. But the best part of that was that was it. We went and church shopped, looked around, tried all the things, kicked all the tires and whatnot. And it was like, how can we not go back to the vineyard? It just made so much sense. So TJ was really great, volunteered a lot in the previous church. And he's like, why don't you take a year to just kind of slow down for a little bit? And little did I know how valuable that was going to be. And then the second thing, if you were here 3 weeks ago, the last message DJ preached, he was talking about the guy, and DJ moved some lights around. And there was a communication problem that was happening. I was that guy. I was the guy that was having a moment. And he's trying to talk to me, and I'm like, we're fine. It's all good. It'll be perfectly fine. But the best part about that is that I knew that DJ and I were going to have a conversation later, that I was able to express my opinion. He heard exactly what I said. We would have a conversation that mended hearts and those types of things before we ever kind of moved forward and doing anything else. And I would encourage you that if you don't do that naturally, that's a really great part of kind of walking in what God would have for you. It doesn't want you to walk around all angry and all that kind of stuff all the time. And I just love that DJ will take the time to do that because he's a busy guy. There's no doubt about that. But we're not going to ignore those conversations. So if you ever get offended or you have a question about the service or a sermon or some sort of topic, if you ever ask me about it, I'll go, DJ would really love to talk to you. So nobody's claiming to be perfect people here, and we're going to do everything perfect every time, or there may just be some sort of bigger explanation that's needed. So how about invitations? That's the power of what we're talking about today. I don't know about you, but I like being invited places. I can kind of get off in my own world sometime, but somebody invites me to dinner, I'm like, yes, this is awesome. 1, because I know they're probably going to pay, and 2, because I like food, right? Or maybe they invite you to a concert, whatever the case may be. I think there's a lot of really great examples. And the hope is that through this time, when I give you examples, you can then turn them into your own examples of what that is. So what is an invitation that looks positive to you? Because you may not want to eat somebody else's food. You may be like, what if they serve something I don't like? Or they put vegetables on my plate, or whatever the case may be that you have to actually eat. Invitations are good and bad. So we have some invitations in the Bible. I want you to think through whatever stories you know through the Bible and think about some invitations. And this is a part where I'm not asking rhetorical questions. I want you to say out loud an invitation that you might recognize from the Bible. And if you don't have any, I have a few in reserve, but I'm hoping that you can think of one. So what's a time in the Bible that you remember something, somewhere was an invitation to somebody? Jesus and the disciples. Okay, so basically Jesus invited each one of those separately, right? Went to each person, had a conversation, really brought them into his 12. What else? Invitation of the Holy Spirit. I love that. So I hadn't really considered that I might get to discuss stuff like that, but what a really awesome thing, right? Gives us a chance to have a direct commune with God through his Holy Spirit, which he brought here on this earth after Jesus passed. What else? Zacchaeus and, the house. Is that the one where they took the part of the roof off and lowered? Yes. Is Zacchaeus a tax collector? No? Yeah. Don't get me going on not knowing Bible stories. All right, a couple others. Woman at the well was one that I thought of that, Jesus offered her, hey, would you give me a drink? Little did she know that was an invitation into, actual Jesus, living water was kind of his phrase of that. And then how about Moses? That's a big one, right? In Exodus 3, 9 through 12, we'll read this one, hopefully. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, so this is God talking to Moses, the children of Israel out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children out of Israel out of Egypt? Or the children of Israel out of Egypt. He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you've brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. That's a big one, right? That one's going to last a lot longer than Moses thought it was going to at the time. I don't think he realized that was a 40-year journey. We call it Jonah and the big fish, or when you can just see there's tons of invitation, right? Jonah, go to Nineveh. I need you to preach that these people are doing terrible things. And he's like, maybe not. And so we ended up on the boat, and that big fish swallowed him, all of those kind of things. All right, and how about invitations that have really mattered? I don't think that all invitations are created equal. You can pick a time that somebody invited you to something you didn't want to go to. Even Moses wasn't generally excited about the whole Exodus thing. So in Numbers 11, he says, Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give to their fathers? Clearly, he's not really excited about the invitation, right? And honestly, they just kept whining. It was really interesting to see it over and over again. It's like a father trying to get his children to not whine. I picture them using that voice too, that whiny voice that kids like to use. I think Dan Bergman's a great example. If you don't know, he's serving with Samaritan's Purse right now. So an invitation that he could go and make money someplace as a nurse. They're just making serious fists of money at this point. Or I can go and serve people who are being torn apart by war. That's a pretty serious invitation, of which he decided to accept, obviously. So I think we've set a clear understanding of there's a variety of invitations in that. But before we kind of dig into that a little bit more, let's figure out how I got here. Why would anybody ever let me talk in front of a bunch of other people who I don't know? And you have no idea who I am. I could be a mass murderer. We don't really know that. Most of you probably know that I'm not. But I have an interesting story. I hope you'll find it interesting in that. But again, it's not about my story. It's about how you interpret your story into what God has for you, right? None of this is really about me. It's just what I'm familiar with. So I'm going to share with you what I'm familiar with. So at age 14, I knew everything, especially that God wasn't real. He was just somebody for a whole bunch of rules and regulations and for weak people. They needed that in their life. I clearly didn't, because I was having a great time just doing everything I wanted to. Honestly, I lived college before I ever got to college, in my life. From age 14 to probably 19 it's rough. Like, I started, ask my wife now, hey, I'll be your boyfriend. She's like, sure, I'll be your boyfriend. It's really that easy. I don't know what everybody's kind of all upset about. It's really simple. And so she tracked me down where I worked after that, and her sister found out that she was talking to me. And her sister literally begged her parents, do not let her date this boy. Like, it is not okay. So I was being uninvited into this scenario. My wife doesn't listen very well sometimes in a loving way, and did not listen to that. I was pretty lost, certain. So, I mean, I'm so far away from God. Everything's great. I just do whatever I want to, and I don't have to think about anything else. Or at least so I thought. And so I go through this period of time where I don't really know what to do. I have a 0.1 grade point average after my first semester of college, right? That's hard. You have to work hard to get a 0.1 grade point average in college. So somewhere along the line, I thought I should fly helicopters, because 0.1 grade point average certainly says fly helicopters. Doesn't matter. I was going to fly. Apparently, I have color blindness that I've never known. My favorite color is blue. I wear blue all the time. I'm apparently colorblind to blue and gray. Go figure. So that didn't work out so well. Joined the Army Reserves, and I was doing the Army Reserve stuff. And then there was this, the first of like a really special conversation that turned into an amazing invitation. I had a teacher in high school who put up with me as a band director. And he was our drum instructor. So in Texas, you like get specialties in there. And this guy was just our drum instructor. That's all he did. And he says, let's go out for Diet Cokes, which really meant beer. I'm all in. Let's go out for a beer, but you can't ask a former student to go have beers with you, I guess. That's not the way that works. But there's a really cool moment where he says, I've never really said this before, but you should be a band director. I'm like, I 100% should be a band director. Don't know why. Grade point average certainly didn't say that. But after that point, I had a mission, right? Like, it was easy to do from there on. He invited me, you should be a band director. And I'm like, of course. And I was on the dean's list the rest of the time, right? Like, it was a really huge difference of knowing what I wanted to do, where I needed to be versus whatever that was before. At this point, wife and I haven't actually met at this, where we're at, but along the way, I'm studying in community college. It's been really amazing. And Teresa steps into my life finally, and then somebody says, you need to play an Easter pageant. If you haven't ever been to one, it's just like what you'd picture in the South. There's a big bunch of people standing around with stage props and Jesus and all kinds of wonderful things happening on a stage. And I'm playing the drums for that. Like, hey, we'll pay you to come to church to play these drums. I'm like, I'm in. Remember, I still don't even know that God's real at this point. But if they're going to give me money, I'm there. I'm in college. Who's not going to go and accept money for that? So it's funny. And those are like, I didn't have anything against Christians. It wasn't like I was staying away from them or, worried that they were going to infect me or whatever the case may be. So that invitation to play Easter led to another invitation. Hey, come and play drums at a church service for us. And I'll pay you $25. Apparently that's enough for me to get up, put some drums in the back of a car, go to a church, unload the drums, practice, sit down, play a service, listen to this guy who keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again to these ladies that are like, they've been saved for 50 or 60 years, right? It's like, come now, come to the altar. This is you. You need to make a decision for the Lord. And I'm like, what is going on with this? Fine, keep paying me $25. I'm good with that. I'm still pretty sure at this point that Christians are crazy. I mean, I just didn't understand it. Wasn't there. God wasn't real. So, those were all invitations. It's great. Has nothing to do necessarily with exactly how life was going at that moment, but they were important invitations nonetheless. So there have been a couple of other powerful invitations, and let me tell you, for every invitation that I talk about today, there's probably 100 different invitations that I'm not talking about. One, because they weren't meaningful or didn't really seem to do anything in my life, or I ignored them, or I just didn't have time because I was too busy fill in the blank doing whatever, right? But along the way, and I'll get back to the rest of my story about how that happened in a bit. Obviously, I wouldn't be standing here if I thought you were all a bunch of crazy people for coming to church and God wasn't real. So there's more of a story that goes along with that. But I have two really amazing stories, in my opinion, of the ways that God can use an invitation to be super powerful. Remember, my story doesn't matter. I want you to figure out what are those invitations in your life. And if this story helps push that along, then great. So I met a guy who came to a birthday party. I was, 30 something. My wife would tell me for sure, but just know I was probably in my 30s. And this guy showed up, and I've been in church now for a while, and he's just super rambunctious, very excitable. We probably had too much alcohol, I'll be honest. But we're playing cards, and we have this really great time. It's wonderful. Didn't think I'd ever really see him again. He's just a friend of a friend who came, but he was one of those like life of the party kind of guys, right? Well, he turns out to be some sort of contractor in San Antonio. We're living in Houston at this point. And the fun part about this is we kind of kept running into each other over and over again. Well, the church that I was at, I did some missions work and that kind of stuff. And there came this opportunity where we were working in Mexico that we needed to finish out this dormitory of bathrooms and then build a whole actual room on top. I do insurance for a living. I don't build anything except maybe something in the garage. I mean, it's not it. Like, that is not my skill. We didn't really have anybody at the church. So I'm sitting around going, these people would like this. I seem to really want to be involved in this for some reason. What's possible? And so I'm sitting there literally at a computer and like, I'm going to call that guy Ray. Ray was the guy that came to the birthday party. Don't really know each other. We've hung out a little bit here and there after that. And so I call this guy and I'm like, hey, do I have a plan for you? What if you went to Mexico and helped build this dormitory and finish out these bathrooms? And he's like, why'd you ask me that? I'm like, what do you mean? What's happening with this? Why are we going in this direction? Little did I know he's just baiting me, but now we know. So he's like, why would you even call me and ask me this right in this moment? I'm like, I'm literally sitting around thinking about, praying over what's going on with this. What are we possibly going to do? And your name pops in my head, and now I'm calling you. And he's like, I'm not kidding you. I literally just prayed to God. I need to serve you and love you. You've got to show me the way that I need to be involved in that. Like, we're not making things up. It's not coincidence. Like, God is right here in this moment between the two of us. Like, hey, I've got something for you, right? And if it was just about that building or the other stuff, sure, maybe that story by itself is meaningful from an invitation point. But clearly that was an offering, an invitation. He accepted it. We ended up in Mexico. There's about 10 other parts of this story that are absolutely amazing that I'm not going to get to share. But essentially, we had $8,000. We needed $18,000. Somehow that showed up. We end up down in Mexico. You can't build this building in a week. Sure, 25 of us who have never done any type of building before with Ray can build this building after he was in a car wreck and had surgery on his knee and couldn't get around. It's just never ending. Not only that, he's at this moment, but this love for Mexico for him that turned into so many things. He's down there serving on a regular basis. He lives in San Antonio, so it's a lot closer to get to from where we're at. It's like 19 hours driving from here at this point, so I don't get down there near as much, but he's 3 hours. So here we are. We introduce him to this children's home that's down there that we're working for, and then he gets all excited and invited and starts raising money for that children's home. Turns out he also finds his wife in Mexico. Why he's like, it's just never ending, right? Like, that's the power of one invitation in his life. We get to have conversation back and forth over this all the time. We're like, I don't know how God did that. I don't understand how that worked or why that worked the way it did. But I had a thought, followed up with it. Granted, it was in some prayer, trying to understand what was going on, and turns into this long, he's 10 years down in Mexico at this point, and a wife that he's been married to for 2 years. And Ray, I had to share this because of him. He would go, yeah, that's history. That's his story. Like, it's right there with him. He completely sees that was just not a coincidence. that we happened to have a conversation that day and got to go do a bunch of really cool stuff. One of my best friends in the world at this point. I wouldn't have known life without him and wouldn't want to live life without him, honestly. All right, so that's story one. Here's Gary. Gary is this guy that I keep seeing every time I show up to a storage unit. And I'll tell you, he lives here. I do have a permission to talk about his story. He's heard his story. I've talked about it with him tons of times. So you're going to meet Gary at some point because he does come around here on occasion. But I'm at the storage unit because moving from 2,800 square feet to 1,000 square feet in Durango is obviously going to create some extra stuff. And so this guy, we're at the storage unit, and he's just hanging out. I don't know what he's doing, but like for me, I can't just not walk by somebody and not say hello or whatever, and he'll eventually say hello back and those types of things. So I probably see him 3 or 4 times, and kind of realizing through the moment of that, like, oh, this guy's actually living here. Like he's staying in the actual storage units themselves. See the little roll-up, he's got everything in there. He'll be having his coffee outside the little roll-up door, and he's always working on a car that's out there. So it's like, okay, that doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't be the first time that God has people who are living without housing in my life. It's actually probably more like what he has me doing more so than talking in front of people like this or anything else. And I love that. So who knows where this is going? Gary and I eventually start having some conversations, and man, that guy's really struggling. Like he tells me, yeah, I've pretty much been banned out of every place in Durango at this point because I get angry and start yelling at people, and so they call the police, and I get a no trespassing, whatever that's called, where he can't actually go in those places anymore. And so guy is really struggling, right? Like anger is there. He's having some vision problems now that he has to go and get shots for on a regular basis. Can you imagine shots in your eyes on a regular? Not a lot of fun, I don't think. And so Gary and I start talking, and Gary loves God, calls him Creator. The Creator and Gary are in regular conversation together. Like everything that you kind of talk to him about, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, will eventually bring back to his Creator. That's what he calls him, his Creator. And so kind of learning just a little bit more of his story was that as we kind of spend more time together, he's like, yeah, my mom, she was a miserable person. Like, I didn't want to be around her. She was so resentful towards us as kids. Real challenge. And then the big breakthrough for him was he's in second grade. Hey, by the way, you're going to do second grade again, and your peers are going to go on without you because you're not learning the things you need to learn. This guy's 68 probably at this point. This is pivotal in his life still. Second grade, we're at 68. He's still carrying the pain of his peers seeing him have to go back and repeat another grade. It's miserable for him. Had they had some of that differentiated learning that we probably have nowadays, they would have realized that Gary is absolutely a genius, honestly. He can fix anything. Cell phone breaks? Oh yeah, let me just fix that. He can't see, remember? Pulls out his giant magnifying glass, some really tiny tools, and he's like, okay, yep, we're all good to go. Need to fix a car, need to fix a heater for the unhoused, whatever the case may be. Gary is on it. So none of that stuff was really related to his intelligence or his aptitude for learning stuff. But man, he still carries that with him. So somebody invited him back to second grade, which was a defining moment for him. So Gary and I keep working, communicating together. This is about the time that we're doing Wednesday dinners at our house. So before the service, we'd have people over and do a dinner at our house because we weren't in a building. I just showed up whenever I wanted to. We weren't really doing a lot from my perspective, so we got to be at the house and do that. And so I invited Gary to come over a couple of times. And he came in and super nervous, just doesn't do well with people in general at this point. But what he finds is that people are very true and honest with him and will listen to the things that he says, and that there are people who love God that are also caring and loving for him. And I don't think he understood where that was going in the moment, nor did I, honestly. But he gets to be around other people and has real conversation. And so he notices a little bit that that feels really good. He's probably been isolated at least 20 years, doesn't really talk to his brother, doesn't talk to his sister at this point, still has family around, but just can't communicate with them because they're all wrong, and he's very angry at them. Like, this is a regular occurrence in his life. You tell Gary no, you are catching the wrath of Gary. Like, I need you to credit that back to my credit card. No, we can't do that. That is not going to go well for anybody's favor. He's going to throw the phone, or he's going to yell all kinds of things at you. Like, that's still the Gary that we have. But, so he's coming in on Wednesdays. We've invited him to come on that. And then COVID happens. And so we're still doing Wednesday groups at our house. Our outpost was there. And Gary kind of got to come and be involved in that and met even more people that were encouraging for him and would say hello to him in the community or stop and have a conversation with him at Walmart when they saw him. Well, that turned into Gary's now spending a lot of time at Durango Joe's, and he's able to have conversations with people at Durango Joe's. They didn't kick him out, by the way. He was able to keep it cool. Like, God is clearly working in his life to help these conversations be more natural. And of course, he's a little old guy with gray hair. Like, who would not want to have a conversation with him unless he's yelling at you and it's not very pretty? And that's not the experience that they have. And so they start talking to him. They start giving him gifts. The people that work there are like, hey, here's, fill in the blank. The guy's not wanting for anything. People driving through at Durango Joe's will come inside and whatnot and spend some time like, hey, can I buy you a burrito? Or can we just have a conversation? So he's being integrated back into what I guess probably we consider a bit of normal society just by an invitation of seeing us. He's coming to visit other folks, and then now he's like actually having conversations. And now he's at my favorite place, which is Taco Boy, because that's really close to the storage units for the most part. So during the winter, Taco Boy has been his go-to because it's close. He doesn't have to drive down that or ride his bike down that treacherous hill where all the ice and snow and all that kind of stuff is. So here's the next level of that. Now Gary feels human. He feels loved by people. He sees God in the people that he's around. He can have the conversation that he wants to have with people and say, what does that look like to you? What does that possibly mean? And I probably forgot to mention, but coordinate missions and outreach, right? So there was a while back where we said, hey, remember that if you see somebody that needs something in the community, we want you to take that moment. If you have an invitation, use it. If you want us to reimburse you for that, we'll give you the money back for that. Don't miss an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody because you didn't have the money in the moment or whatever the case may be. Gary took that to heart. So he's living down by the river during the summer. That's where you're going to find him. You probably can't find him because he hides pretty well. The police don't ever find him. And that's his happy place. Like, if birds will come and lay on him, he has succeeded in the day. Like, that's totally happened. And it was the best day of his life, and he still talks about it on a regular. But what he sees is people that we don't necessarily see at the Purple Cliffs, right? So we're at the Purple Cliffs doing things here and there for that. And he's become known as Santa to a group of Native Americans that live down by the river, at least last summer. Who knows if they'll be back this year? Because he would just come bearing gifts. Like, he would see them like, this person he's had a 10-minute conversation with is really hungry, so he brings a chicken for them to share for the day or whatever. Remember, this guy doesn't have really that much money. He's living unhoused. Doesn't matter to him. He's getting to share with other people some really amazing perspectives that he hasn't been able to share in who knows how many years, decades probably. So the other part of that is he'll go, okay, well, I'm going to buy food because they won't let us reimburse him for that. He's like, but, hey, I bought this guy, a pillow or a blanket or a sleeping bag. That's what those are called. Or a sleeping bag. And he'll occasionally give us a receipt for that. That gave him so much joy to love on those people and to have conversations where they treated him as human. He could help them. He could be involved in that. And he's inviting other people into that now, into conversation, into, hey, don't you want to change some of that? He's a recovering alcoholic, so he's like, you got an alcohol problem. He'll tell him straight up. And until you face that, you're going to continue to struggle to even be here, on this earth the way you're going. So for me, it's clear that Gary was put in my life, right? Like, who gets to have those types of conversations and watch somebody blossom, if you would, in just getting themselves back into society. And it took, God's invitation, like, hey, have a conversation with that person. Okay, have 10 conversations with that. Have conversations that are so loud your wife has to leave the room because we are so intense in our conversation about what's going on with God in his life that it's uncomfortable for her. So we've had some really good conversations. But clearly it's been good for both of us, and it's been a huge blessing. So I think 3 things that I've learned from Gary's story, that he lives close to the Creator more so than probably anybody I've ever met, and that the Creator is involved in my life in every single moment, and that there's great joy in seeing God's creation all around me. So Gary and those birds, wants to hear him sing, wants to have, literally, it would be amazing if they landed on him all the time. He doesn't have to have those struggles anymore. There are moments where he really wants to be angry. There's no doubt about that. But he can even recognize at this point, the old me would have just gone off the rails for this. But he's finding that when he treats people with a whole bunch of love and respect and those types of things, that they also give that back. And it doesn't have to be combative in that. And then living inside of God's will and seeking ways to show that love to others is often hard, but also really worthwhile. It takes perseverance. And those difficult conversations, I knew that the words that were coming out of my mouth, Gary would listen to, because he'd proved over and over again, because he'd ask me about it 4 days later. When you said, and he tells me exactly what I said, which is really scary. I spit out a lot of words in my life, and I don't always remember exactly what I said. I have another friend that's actually here tonight that does the same thing. 6 months ago, you said, I'm like, can't even remember what I ate for lunch. So, all right, those are the couple stories that have been meaningful in my life, but I want you to take some time, if you haven't already. What are those invitations that you've received or given to others? What does that look like? Can God really use you to make a difference in this world? So one of the questions that I come back with is how do I know this is God? All right, I think that's a fair question. I'm not going to say that every time I feel like I answered an invitation, I knew that it was 100% from God. But I can test it against what I know, reading in the Bible, what the Holy Spirit is telling me in that very little moment, and through prayer, right? If it's a big one like that, spend some time in those things. Don't be afraid to do that. If it seems completely opposite to what the Bible and the Holy Spirit and everything else is telling you is right, it probably is. That's not going to be God in your life. Look for those signs among you. Who keeps showing up in your life over and over again? And I guess while we're talking about this, the same invitation for me is not going to be the same invitation for you. If that was the case, the whole city of every Christian in Durango would go to one person standing on the corner who was asking for money that day, and we'd all give him money. It'd be like the GoFundMe of sign holders for the day. They'd have tens of thousands of dollars in minutes because we all showed up to give that one guy money. I'm not convinced that God's going to use those resources on that one person where all of us show up. Not to say he wouldn't, but it's unlikely, right? So the things that God pushes on you and is encouraging you and shows you in that, those are the things that really matter, that I have seen, especially in my walk, that give a lot of fruit in that. All right, so you're going, all right, how is one person going to make a difference in the world? Yeah, you have a couple of stories, but there's really a lot of power in that. And for me, my goal, maybe it's a little short-sighted, but I thought in my life, if I could really affect 3 people during the course of the time that I've been here on this earth, and that while we're having those conversations, we're living life together, we're discussing, praying for one another and whatnot, if they could then go and find 3 more people themselves to have that conversation with. Will you go ahead with that next slide? So essentially, this is going to be not that one. That one. Thank you. So this is the way I think. If I can make a difference in one person, 3 people's lives, that's 4. I get that. It's the only picture I could find. Google was a little bit hard. We'll get to the next slide in a minute. But look at all the people down, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th level. How many people that is? Your one decision to really pour into and encourage somebody else in that really turns into quite a story, right? All right, let's now go to that next picture. Check out these numbers. This is crazy. All right, there's me. I'm 1. When I talk to 3 others, then there's 4. But more importantly, look at 10. That's 19,600. That's the whole population of Durango City proper at this point, right? Is that going to take a long time? Sure. We're talking, probably 100 years. But keep it going. What happens? You get to the number 15, 4.78 million people. That's the size of Norway. You've affected potentially the whole entire country of Norway at this point. If you really want to get crazy, go down to 20 and you're at 1.161 billion people because you decided to make some invitations and have some conversations and live life with people. That's insane, right? 1.16 billion people or whatever else the rest of that number is. So when you feel insignificant in your walk, like, why would I even do that? I hope you'll keep in mind the power of 3. Jesus had 12. I didn't feel like I could go, I can do 12. I can do that. I don't know how that works. I do know there is a system out there, and I can't remember the name of it, where they actually, that is the focus, like really high-powered individuals will pour into 12 folks. I don't feel like that's possible with me. So, and I will tell you that, like, out of all of these things, are you going to be disappointed in the way that you're doing this? And I'll tell you, like, Durango is a place of great happiness. I can climb a mountain. I'm very happy. I don't really climb mountains, by the way. I climb things like Smelter, but I can ride a mountain bike, or I can raft, or fill in any number of things. And those are going to be really things that make me happy during the middle of all that. But it's completely different from the joy that I find in serving and loving God and offering those invitations and living life with people and doing those things. And I will tell you that I think the pursuit of that kind of joy is where our heart is. And the great part about it in Durango is you get to have that joy while doing all those other things at the same time that bring you happiness. It's probably one of the reasons why we moved from Houston to Durango. Other than, in my mind, I can't help 6 million people, but maybe I could make a difference in the life of 50,000 that are in the Durango area, right? That seems, in the way my brain works, that makes more sense to me. Like, yeah, we can make a big difference from that. What else? When you see me running around solving things and breaking things and volunteering and those types of things, that's another way that I find so that you as an individual don't have to do those things so that you can have a moment with God, have an invitation ready, or meet somebody and have a conversation. So if you ever see me running around just doing a bunch of stuff, I'm trying to set the table where you get the opportunity to have some of the joy that has been brought into my life through the church. So, all right, really, how did I get here? Remember, somebody pays me $25 to go to church. I'm all down. Sure, that altar call to these women that are 60 to 80 years old, I'll be honest, most of them had blue hair. I don't know what's going on with blue hair for people that were 60 and 80, but that was the thing. And I'm in like a South Oak Cliff, Dallas. It's an ugly place. Like, that was the roughest place you could possibly be when I was growing up, was essentially South Dallas. But these little ladies are there every week. You got an organist on one side called Mittens, because it sounds like she's wearing mittens when she plays, and you got a Southern Gospel trio on the other side, which I'm involved in. So whichever one you liked, you just sat close to that. I'm rolling my eyes on the regular. This guy's like 20 minutes at the end, just one more verse of "Here I Am, Lord," or whatever song we had at the end of that. And there was this moment that my wife was fortunate enough to remind me about, was that I, still music school, right, doing that thing, I go off to this convention, and I come back, and I'm like, I'm insane. We called it, I literally had somebody who was a psych major diagnose me as hypomanic. Like, I was so high on life, legally, no drugs induced, nothing involved. It was just like, wow, the world is so amazing. My life was going so good. I was so excited about the path that I was on that guy invited me to be a band director after that. It's so crazy, right? And I got to a point one day in a shower, of all things, where the glory of God just came and was there with me. Like, look at all these things I've put in your life that are going so well. You clearly have been ignoring me along this way, but I've been here this whole time. Let's see where this is at. And so that was like my moment. It doesn't always happen where God is so good to them that they see that. A lot of times you have the opposite, where it's like, there's nothing else I can do. Surely somebody's going to help me, and Lord, come and be a part of that. I'm thankful for that, and I'll be honest that I actually do say a prayer on a regular basis. Like, Lord, let me learn the easy way. Don't bring me into like a really difficult situation so that I must learn the hard way. I'll get the clues. Just show them to me, and I'll try to follow them the best I can. But little did I know that that preacher had given me the tools that I knew at that moment was like, oh, okay, it's been me this whole time. He's been offering this invitation to know and to love Jesus in my life for, I think it was probably 9 months or so. Thought the guy was totally crazy. But the repetition that was there was like, oh, I need to confess to God. I need to tell him that I know that he's really real and that I want him to be the king of my life. I want you to take my life and show me what that looks like for you. So in Romans 10, it says, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For with the heart one believes and it is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. And that was my moment. Like, I was so patient, so loving for all the vile stuff that I was spitting out and the terrible things that I was doing, that he would wait for me to have that epiphany. And I'm so thankful that it was in a moment of positivity as opposed to I'm in jail. Fill any number of possibilities at that point. So I promised myself that when I had the opportunity to speak and encourage other people that I won't leave that out because it was so meaningful in my life, right? So maybe you're at a point where you've been putting something off with God. Or like me, I thought I was doing what God wanted, but really 10 years later, that's when he had to bring me to my knees and I really understood a lot more about what he was planning on doing in my life. So I want you to spend some time in that. Like, where are you? Maybe you're just like I was at 10 years after knowing that God was real, trying to figure out, why is this so hard? What have I done? God, you've got to fix this. Maybe you're at that moment where it's so awesome, there's no other way that this could be by anything else but God in your life. But I want you to take that moment. So we're going to take just a moment of silence. Some of you, if you've ever been to Southern Baptist Church, this is what happens. We're going to have a moment of silence where you can just do some work with the Lord. Maybe that's a prayer that you wanted to do, or you want to turn something over to him, or you've never really said, hey, I want you to be like the main thing in my life. This is really important to me. This would be a good time to do that. I'm not pressuring you. I don't want you to do that because I tell you you should do that. It's all about, that's between you and God, whatever that may be. So let's take a moment, and then I'll finish up. If you're a believer already, maybe say a prayer for those that might be here that don't actually know that yet. They don't believe or don't understand what that means in their life. I don't sit in silence very well, so don't worry. We're not going to have to sit here very long. If it's not today, then when? That's fine. Tiffany's going to be around afterwards to have a conversation. Paul's going to be around afterwards to have a conversation. If you just want to talk with somebody, maybe you need some clarity. If you have lots of questions, that's right. You should have lots of questions because we're really working that. There's a lot of mystery involved in loving and knowing the Lord and making him part of that. So, and then of course, the second part of that, which we didn't really talk about, if you made a decision for that or maybe made one recently and you haven't ever been baptized, let us come around you and be the church that supports you in your walk with that. Like, he calls us to be in community together. That's why we gather here a lot on Wednesday nights and other times, because life is better when we live in a community. So if you did that, don't forget, sign up for baptism over there if you want to understand a little bit more about what that looks like. Catch one of us before we go. The best thing that we could do out of this time together in my life, and I can be selfish here, is that if you have a moment where you heard an invitation and you chose to do something for that you share that story with me. Who knows when I'll get to share that story next? You might be one of the 2 stories that I got to share tonight. I don't know what that's going to look like. God works in all kinds of ways. There have been hundreds of things like we talked about that I thought, this is it. God's going to be in this and we're going to do that. They may still be, but I just didn't get to actually see the finished part of that. God had that worked out farther down the road than where it was in my life. All right? Let me pray, and then we're going to head out. Lord, I just thank you for gathering us all together. Thank you for the hearts that are here, Lord. Thank you for the love that you shared with us so patiently along the way, that you'd take somebody with such a broken past that I really shouldn't have been anywhere at all with people, Lord. That you'd do work in my life to make that different and better. And not only that, that you make it joyful in the process, Lord. So thankful for you and all that works. But I pray that you'll keep everybody safe. Bring DJ back to us so that we can enjoy some of that enthusiasm and learn all the things that he learned while he was in quiet time with you. We pray all these things in your name. And then here's something that I just thought, I don't know what DJ says at the end of that. We're lifting our hands to God and we're doing something because we need to figure that out. You'll see a slide probably next week, actually, because it's been on my mind. But Psalm 29 says, may the Lord give you strength. May the Lord give strength to his people, and may the Lord bless his people with peace. You guys go. Thank you. This is where music starts soon, and it's less awkward.